afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our next session. My name is Rachel Johnston. I'm the BWC TTA Program Manager. During this session, we'll be discussing pilot testing and evaluation of BWC equipment with Jeff Smith and Charles Stevenson of CNA and Commissioner Scott Adams of Brook Park, Ohio. And now I'm happy to turn it over to Jeff Smith.
Thanks, Rachel. Appreciate the opportunity.
Rachel, good afternoon. My name's Charles Stevenson. I, along with the retired Public Safety Director, Jeff Smith from Sturgis, and Commissioner Scott Adams, will be doing today's presentation on testing and evaluation. Before we really jump into it, I would like for just to say something for everyone to think about. In your private lives, I don't think anybody out there would buy a new car without kicking the tires. Would you really believe the advertising and the word of a salesman? Well, I don't think we want to do that for our officers that are going to use a piece of equipment that has become so very important, not only for the department, the agency, but for the community also. As Chief Acevedo said, he'd rather not have body-worn cameras if it's going to fail when he needs it the most. So would you really not test the body-worn camera and the software and hardware that you're going to provide for your officers? With that said, of course, I would like to begin with just going over the mechanics of developing a comprehensive testing and evaluation program. But before I really get into the mechanics of it, I'd like to point out a few differences. While a pilot program includes testing and evaluation of the hardware and software that your department may be considering, it's not necessarily the opposite way around. Testing and evaluation looks different for each and every department. Your department may be replacing an existing manufacturer's equipment, so the level of T&E may not be that of a department that's looking at implementing a program for the first time. A department that already has body-worn cameras basically has already piloted the use of body-worn cameras, so they're going to concentrate on more heavily on the testing and evaluation of cameras. For those departments that have never used a camera, it's going to be more of a proof of concept. Your pilot program is going to focus a lot on a body-worn camera meeting your operational needs. T&E, of course, will be part of that to make sure the particular hardware and software you choose meet your requirements. So that said, where do you begin? I think for everyone that's worked with the TTA, you'll know we always talk stakeholders, and of course when it comes to choosing a body-worn camera, you have your internal stakeholders, and of course that's going to be the officers that are going to use them. That's going to be your IT department. It's going to be a host of others, maybe your union reps. From an internal perspective, that need to play a part in the process of coming up with a test and evaluation plan. Of course, externally, you're going to have your justice stakeholders, you're going to have your community. Well, while your community doesn't play a role so much in what you choose, what you share as far as video with the community is going to be really important. Body-worn cameras have improved drastically in the last 10 years. I've been following it for a long time. If you would have viewed video before stabilization and other refinements came along, you would really see that body-worn cameras, for someone that's not used to them, it is a shock when they first see the video that was produced. Of course, your justice stakeholders. you have to work with your prosecutors, your court systems. We've had cases where a department has chosen a particular manufacturer, a particular vendor, and the prosecutors have had difficulties receiving the evidence, as the court system showing it in courts. So all those need to play a role in your final choice as far as the hardware, software, and the manufacturer you go with. Of course, with any T&E project and everything, you really have to begin by establishing a working group with a project manager in charge of it, and representation from all the different, the IT section, the officer section. And of course, what would you begin with? Well, you define your general hardware and software requirements. Before you even start reviewing specific products, define what your equipment has to have, those features. And I'll refer back to Chief Afacedo. He mentioned automatic triggering. Well, not every manufacturer offers manufactured or automatic triggering. So if that's an important requirement that is an absolute, must have, that needs to be established from the beginning. So you'd establish your hardware and your software requirements. You'd collect all the key information about data storage requirements, the number of officers that you need to purchase cameras for, retention guidelines. You need to review your state laws as far as retention and public release. All that is going to play into developing what your actual hardware and software requirements are. Next, you would assess the current technical capabilities within the department, and if this is a regional effort, you may want to explore the regional opportunities. You'd want to understand and document the current data storage capabilities, the capacity, the scope, and if this is on a regional and even on a local, you'd want to do it across judicial entities and law enforcement units, including the time, the effort to manage, especially when it comes to releasing videos and redacting video material. You'd want to understand the court and the prosecution technology capabilities and their capacity for digital evidence. For first-time users of body-worn cameras, it's a little bit different than what you've generated through your in-car systems. It produces a larger quantity of video, and it produces more evidence. So you really need to work with your prosecutors and your courts to really understand what their capacity and their capabilities are to receive this evidence. You need to make some initial decisions. Are you looking to store on premise? You looking to store in the cloud, or is it going to be a hybrid solution? And of course, once again, getting back to you need to understand the regional capabilities. I know one story of a local DA's office. And these local DA offices, depending on how large the county, the city they support, they'll have a multitude of different agencies giving them digital evidence. You really want to talk to your DAs because they're getting access in different storage systems. Some are getting DVDs, some are getting thumb drives, some are going in the cloud to pull out. All this consumes DA's time, and you really need to have that worked out and have an agreement before you even start looking at the products out there. Next, of course, you'd investigate your body-worn camera vendors and products. You would review all their information, see what their availability is, see what their features are. Of course, the features are going to come from the requirements that you did previously. Things like auto triggering, pre-record, battery life, field of view. These things are always in a constant state of change. Of course, by you conducting T&E, and selecting a manufacturer that's sending a message back to those vendors that don't offer the features, the capabilities that you're looking for. Of course, during this process of investigating vendors, you'd want to contact agencies. And of course, when it comes to contacting agencies, you'd want to contact agencies with a similar profile or legal environment and get their feedback. I think it's safe to say for the agencies that we have worked with in the TTA, at the conclusion of the grant period, we do what we call an exit survey. I think one of the most frequent feedback that we get back from agencies is we wish we would have spent a little bit more time talking to other agencies about the product we chose and doing a little bit better job at testing and evaluating the products. Of course, you'd want to develop your procurement strategy and select potential solutions. Your vendors, of course, consistent with your local procurement. Of course, this has to be in line with your available budget and your limits. I can't stress this more. Don't forget to include the cost of the full life cycle, what it's going to cost, at the end to replace or that body worn camera and continue your project. Because once you get into body worn cameras, you start using body worn cameras. In the current environment, you're going to continue to use body worn cameras. I think it's safe to say, while in the beginning of body worn cameras, there were some agencies that implemented a program and for various reasons halted or stopped. But those agencies have body worn cameras again. So for the near future, body worn cameras are going to be a tool that is going to be a required piece of equipment for police agencies. Of course, next you'd want to develop your plan for a controlled field test or pilot of other products. And of course, this plan needs to be developed from the requirements, specifications, and features that you deem most important. Of course, things like, the duration of the pilot or test program have to be established. While some departments, they may run a pilot for 6 months, others may only do it for a couple of weeks or a shorter duration. You'd want to, of course, pick your participants to be issued a body worn cameras. What I will say about the participants, I would look for officers that are enthused about body worn cameras. They're excited about them. I have seen, in my experience, most often they'll pick officers from out of the traffic section or division off the road patrol. For a pilot, you don't want to put a body worn camera on something that has a high probability of a critical incident happening. And I'm going to mention that in just a second. Of course, before you even ever put a body worn camera on an officer, you want to have a pilot policy in place. And of course, you want to provide that officer or officers with training on not only on equipment, but on the policy and how to use that body worn camera. And of course, T&E would be a little bit useless unless you actually had a set criteria for your evaluation, of course, once again, based on the defined software and hardware requirements. After all this is said and done, this would lead you to issue an RFP. Of course, for anyone that's been involved in developing an RFP, what you learn out of your test and evaluation is going to be the requirements that go into your RFP, and of course, in the end will be used for your weighted and ranked scoring of the manufacturer's products that you finally choose. Of course, once you do that, your field test pilot product, you've developed your short list, and of course, you actually test the products, and then you rank your products based on the field test, your weighted score from your RFP, and you select a solution. In brief, that's setting up the actual mechanics of the program. I would like to also suggest that the T&E doesn't stop there. I would highly recommend that after 6 months that you reevaluate using what you've learned in the past 6 months and the criteria that you develop in the beginning to see how well your choice is performing. And this should be done throughout the whole life of your body worn camera solution that you picked. At this point, I would like to turn it over to my co-presenter, Jeff Smith. Jeff's going to give you his experience from a practitioner's aspect of what his department and what he went through in conducting a test and evaluation of body worn cameras.
Thanks, Charles. Yeah, you used a good analogy at the beginning with, kicking the tires and checking out everything that you can when it comes to BWCs. And, I think kind of start from the end. A lot of us, as administrators and getting into these projects, unfortunately, many times we end up with a mindset or a specific idea of maybe a vendor or a couple of vendors. And unfortunately, too many times we get to that point that we've then acquired the equipment and it's not exactly what we wanted. And, throughout working with various agencies with their BWC rollouts and everything else, a reoccurring theme that we hear a lot is, I don't want to call it regrets, but a lot of places that wish they could have done more with test and evaluation. And so it's something to always keep in mind, whether or not you're going to be updating in the future, whether it's something that you haven't committed. We've even had some of our agencies that have changed mid-process. And if you talk to any of them, they will explicitly tell you that you do not want to go through that. So with my agency, my former agency, one of the big things that we did, we were really early to the BWC game. So we had quite a bit of time and not a whole lot of products that we got to experiment with and basically do a lot of test and eval with. Our goal at the time, because we had in-car systems, where we were hung up at the beginning was we wanted an integrated system. With us being smaller and everything else, it just made the most sense if it was feasible and had features and the things that we wanted out of it. The problem was the company that we had at that time with the in-car systems, their body-worn camera system at the time didn't have most of the features that we were looking for, whether that was auto triggers, things of that nature. So we basically grabbed everything that we could. And that would be my suggestion to everyone, that, maybe time constraints, things like that, you can't grab 6 or 7 vendors and do a full test and eval. Maybe you can grab the top 3 or 4, but it is going to take some research at the front end, as you were talking about, Charles, with trying to figure out at least some of those baseline features that you're going to have. Do you have to have automatic triggers? Do you have to have battery life that's going to last you a 12-hour shift? And if not, how are you going to compensate for that? Just various things like that. Once you get that starting point, then you can talk to different vendors, start to get a feel for what they have to offer, and then, basically get those models and test them, which is what we did. What we tried to do is make sure that we ran them through basically everything you can think of, whether that was road patrol, firearms training, ground fighting, you name it, just to see what would happen, how they would hold up, what they would capture, what they wouldn't capture. A whole nother topic, but is obviously important for considering what you're going to pick, is what vendors have for mounting options. So some will have different mounts, and some will have different locations that you might be, you'll only be able to use those particular locations, and that may not be conducive for what you're going to use them for or what you want to capture. So running them through at their paces, and getting those expectations, and then also checking out, is battery life what is promised or is it not? Do I have an issue if I'm in a cold weather environment compared to a constant climate temperature? Also back to those mounts, what am I doing if it's cold out, and somehow it was going to be affixed to a vest? Well, now that's covered with a coat. It's so the concept, back to using the kicking the tires, is trying to run them through all of that. So we did all of that. And basically what we found was, at the time, and this was about 2014 into 2015, we didn't really have a real good magic vendor answer for our problem. So we sat back and waited a little while. We ended up then picking a vendor that would basically work for us, that had the most features that we were looking for. It wasn't integrated with our system, but we tried to project our budget so that eventually we would be able to integrate the systems. And we went with what was going to be the best option for us at the time. And then in 2015-16, we applied, similar to everyone else on here, for a grant, and did a supplemental and added more cameras on, so that we could basically go to one-to-one with all of our officers. And then eventually we were able to integrate. But as I said before, and I know Commissioner Adams will talk a little bit about it, it just over and over again, the one thing in the exit survey that you were talking about earlier, just as a reminder, if you have the opportunity, and you haven't already selected a vendor, or you're going to be changing up, take the opportunity to do some research, take the opportunity to kick those tires, grab everything that you can, run them through the paces of your department, because every department's a little bit different. So even though you might reach out to those regional agencies and you want to make it easy on your DA, that might be a consideration. But maybe there's some specific things for how you operate or how you're set up that may change compared to what the others are using. So try to find that ideal. It's similar to going through policy. All the policies are always tailored to each agency. They're similar in a lot of ways, but there's fine little idiosyncrasies that are going to take form in each agency, and trying to consider that with some of the vendors.
How you doing, Charles? Thank you very much, Jeff, for inviting me to this presentation today. Here in the city of Brook Park, give you a little quick background. We're an inner-ring city of the city of Cleveland. So we're at their immediate southern border, and we do have two major highways that transact through our community, as well as railway lines, and we have their airport in our backyard. So we do get a lot of traffic. We do get a lot of situations that develop here on the ground with our police force to deal with. We are 36 sworn officers strong. And when the BWC program grant came up for us in 2019, I met with our chief, and we sat down and put together a learning group of myself, the chief, his tech officer, and the captain. And we felt that this is a program that we wanted to bring forward. We took it to the mayor. The mayor agreed. We then moved forward with deliberation of what system to use. At that time, we did look at integration very heavily, because we already had the WatchGuard dashboard system, or in-car system, and it was working very well. But as you know, there are limitations to it. Once you get away from the front of the vehicle, as all of you know, there's not a whole lot the system's going to pick up for you, sometimes some sound, and that's about it. So we definitely wanted to go to the BWC component. Upon early research, we found there were 19 body-worn camera manufacturers. Panasonic, Coban Technologies, Wolfcom, WatchGuard, and so on. Many, many good systems. So what we wanted to do was hone down the ones that would integrate with our system, of course, being the WatchGuard dashboard system. And we set tasks for each one of us and the member of the advisory panel. And one was for the chief to speak to other chiefs in nearby communities, because we felt that that would give us a real world result of what the system's requirements are. Interaction with all other agencies, as well as data storage. You want to always keep that at the forefront next to the body-worn camera equipment. You want to make sure you have sufficient space on your computer system to store the data that is going to come in reams. And it's very important, as you know, to have that prepared for your prosecutor and for your Cuyahoga County prosecutor in our neck of the woods, and full court procedures and so on, for individual requests by citizenry also. So once we narrowed that down, we narrowed it down to 4 different systems that we felt would integrate well with our dash cam system that would be utilized daily by the 36 officers throughout the 3 shifts. And we found very quickly that technology wasn't as friendly on certain systems as it was on others, and that the usefulness of what we wanted, the auto, for instance, and the battery life was very important to us. And we wanted to make sure we had reserves available to us, but at the same point, back at the station, that the officer today could bring to the scene if necessary. We felt that the longer the battery life, the better the officer's performance in the field would be, and the more safe all those involved would be. So as we move forward, we narrowed it down again to 2. And lo and behold, the final one that we chose after 6 weeks of evaluation, we invited 3 of them to send their systems to us. We did evaluate the 2 systems for 2 weeks each. The 3rd system we evaluated as our choice for 3 weeks, and then we made our decision, began to talk with the sales personnel to get the right pricing, and we did narrow it down to the sister of our dash cam to WatchGuard video. And we haven't had any problems with the system per se. Their technological backup is strong. The equipment itself is rough and tough. It can take what is dished out, and it does work 99.9%. It's only, I'm saving that 0.01 for that happenstance where the battery is dead. But most of the time, as we require, according to our policy, that they have a full charge and a full charge backup battery. So we eliminate that problem. But I can't say enough to make sure you have a lot of storage available for your computer system. That's one of the things that we didn't have enough of, but we quickly repaired and acquired, and were able to adapt to it using our IT person. So invite your IT person to your advisory panel, which is one of the things we missed and should have done up front. And instead of an evaluation at the end, we should have had him up front with us throughout the whole procedure. And I think that might have streamlined it, even saved us a few weeks. But that all being said, the system's operating very well out in the field. One of the very first things that it allowed us to do was a pedestrian auto chase where the individuals left their primary vehicle and took off on foot. Our officers had to be in pursuit. And sure enough, we were able to apprehend 3 individuals that had left that vehicle off of the dash cam, and all 3 of them claimed that there was some sort of police brutality against them, and all 3 of them had to rescind that thought process because the body-worn camera system showed exactly what occurred with sound. So we were in a good position to reevaluate our decision about 4 months ago, because we've had the system approximately a year in the field, and everyone is still glowing about it, that it still works the best. We did have, of the 36 officers, we had approximately 4 officers that were not, let's just say, fans of it up front, but they became fans after they witnessed what occurred with other officers and how it acts as a safety position or tool when they come upon a scene and they see the body cam and they warn them. They say, listen, everything you're saying to us now is on tape. It changes the dynamic dramatically, especially for those that are not under the influence. The ones under the influence obviously are going to continue the antics, but on the other end of it, the ones that are not under the influence, they calm down, and it acts as a tool to bring people to more of a civil discourse in an intense moment. So we feel very confident with that. We've had a complete drop of apprehension from our officers to the units. And we've also had a complete embrace of the system by our community as at large and our secondary departments that we work with, because then you're able to interchange and review. Because in our neighborhood, we had a system, which I explained to Jeff last year. As soon as we had BWC on board, about 90 days, we had a situation where 3 police departments were involved in one car chase. And that again brought forward the light and changed pleas, and it resulted in no criminal charges against any of our police officers. And we were able to move forward from that event without any injury. But as I can say, when you do your checks, make sure you check with, we looked at 6 of the 19. And the information that we again wanted was very simple. We wanted it to integrate seamlessly as possible with our dash cam system, to be technologically efficient but simple to use, and to be durable. Those were the key things that we came out of that we were worried about it. And much like Jeff, there was during the testing phase, the rough and tumble situation where we literally dropped the unit on the ground and then picked it back up, plugged it back in, and it operated no problem. We did go also to the range with it, and it worked flawlessly. We used it in a mock situation of a takedown several times. The 3 different, at this point, we had it narrowed down to 3 systems. We did all 3 systems in a mock takedown several times. It held up very strong. And I can't say enough about the other ones, but I know the watch guard system integrated the best with its companion, the dash cam.
We'd like to ask a few questions before we open it up to questions. Of course, the first question: did you conduct pilot testing before selecting a vendor? If everyone could let us know, and we'll share the results with the viewers. Commissioner and Jeff, both of you, while they're collecting everyone's input, I kind of like to open up the question with a question of my own. How were the vendors as far as pushback? Providing equipment for you to field test. Were they willing? I mean, did they put time limitations on you to say, oh, here, you got a couple of days to look at this product? How were they with as far as maybe for providing a little bit of training to get your officers up to speed? Did they work with you?
Part of the procedure was to deal with the individuals verbally on the phone, and through a couple of smaller meetings by like Zoom type of situations. I handled the majority of those, but the chief did sit in with me several times because it involved acquisition. I wanted to have one of our finance people in with us, and I brought in the assistant fiscal finance director was with us. And we made it very clear up front that we're not buying it until we've tested it. And the 6 vendors we originally started with whittled down to 5 on that pretext that they were looking at deposit for damage to the equipment. So the other 5 did not. They felt that this is part of the procedure that to move forward with to the decision making, and they allowed us to do, most of the vendors did 2 or 3 units, and we were able to get use those in random situations, charge one up, take one out, barely used. And then the other one was wait till there's the last half hour left. Let's see what it does with that. And we had an enormous amount of field testing with this equipment. But to answer your question in a few words, they were ready and able to supply us with the equipment. It was basically you bought it if you break it, which made it easier for us to assume the role of using the equipment in the field.
Jeff, any pushback, or how willing were manufacturers when you asked them to view it?
Yeah, and mine would have been longer ago than Commissioner Adams, but it depended on the vendor back then, at least. Most of them, same thing, 2 to 3 units. I think one of the vendors really didn't say a whole lot, that if we did break it, the rest of them, we signed an agreement basically that was the case. Pretty much all of them, though, worked with us directly, and obviously no COVID at that time, came and did installs of their software so that we could play around with that a little bit also, in addition to the equipment. It was more like a trials basis stuff. didn't quite have all the features, but at least would give us a little bit of an idea on how it was going to work and if there would be any kind of integration with the current system, things like that. But overall, like I said, less vendors available back then, less BWCs, but the majority of them were very cooperative and willing.
You touched on a good point that not only did you look at the hardware, the body worn camera itself, and how well it functioned and it operated, and things like battery life, ease of use, field of view and stuff. But you also looked at the software, how it's uploaded, how it's tagged, how it's stored. Was redaction an issue, or did you get a chance to see how labor intensive redaction is, or maybe how easy it is?
Yeah, we did. And that was one of our key factors in trying to, when we narrowed ours down, functionality. And like I said, some of those auto triggers for us was big, but redaction was at the top of the list, just with being a smaller department. And we knew that we would basically have one person, our records clerk, assigned. And depending on how much we were dealing with either FOIA currently, or problems that we were having with doing redaction from our in-car system, which was not user-friendly for doing that, we did. And so obviously every vendor is a little bit different. Some have their own software. Some of the vendors, you either ship it off and they redact for you. There's a wide variety. So that was a big part of our process in trying to figure out what was going to, at our best guess, work out the best in the long run for us. And I would just stress that everybody who's gone through and is dealing with body worn cameras, short of having some kind of magic out there, redaction always seems to be cumbersome. Whether it's user friendly or not, it's time consuming and things of that nature.
Okay, well, thank you both. And I think I can see the results of the poll, and 82% conducted a pilot test. So that's real good, real good news. I would, and I don't know what for the remaining 18% that did not conduct. I don't know what state where you're at in your program, but if possible, you may want to consider conducting a pilot test, and of course, if not in the future, when that equipment gets replaced, we'd encourage you to think about a pilot test. What we'd like to do now is open it up to everyone that's viewing the presentation, and hopefully we'll have some good questions, and hopefully we can answer them for you. But we'd like to open it up for questions now.
Charles, so we have received one participant question so far. It might be appropriate for John Markovic. I'm not sure if he's still on the call. But it is, so this agency received funding for BWCs in 2019 and 2020. And moving forward, they are wondering if grant funding will ever be allowed to be used for cloud storage, which can be a high amount of the funding grant cost.
I'm in total agreement with you. That's definitely a BJA question. I don't know if John is in our session or the other session. He may be in the other session. What we can do is get back with you with an answer on that one, because I would hate to say something and not be exactly correct.
Absolutely. So I also have a few other questions I can ask, but we do have two more polls if we would like to deploy those and just get a sense of what agencies have been doing.
That would be great. But while we're waiting for the poll results to be tabulated, I'll ask another question. If you had to conduct your and of course, it's both for the commissioner and Jeff, your test and evaluation over, would you have done anything different? Would you have added more users? You mentioned IT. being part of the team that you put together to evaluate and everything. What are your thoughts if you could do it all over again? Jeff, I'd go with you first, I guess, this time.
That's probably a tough one. I think I would try to expand, and Scott said that they tried to get it down to as few. I would be in the same boat, that I would really try to do all of, and you labeled them all off at the beginning with a nice little kind of checklist of a full range of T&E. I think I would really want to dig very deep, look at because I think priorities also change. So that might go into talking about a little bit what important factor of that poll. Those priorities change, and you start to see what might come up later. So you might anticipate that maybe storage is going to be your big issue. So you're trying to check that out as you're doing your T&E. Later, you might find out, like I said, for us, one of the tough aspects was dealing with redaction. We kind of expected that, but it wasn't really a reality until we were fully rolling with BWCs. So I think some of those priorities changed. So with that, I think I would have done a lot more on the front end with making sure that I got the vendors, especially with there being 19, 20, 25, however many are out there currently, really dialed that in, and then taken all of those and kind of set that list of priorities to what I guess reality was showing us with the department versus what we were trying to guess what that was going to be, so that we'd be able to expand that a little bit.
But when you say dial it in,
Sure.
and of course, if I remember correctly, in the end, you T&E 5 different vendors. When you say dial in, you would have been
And it could be a simple.
or it would have been
905 was, yeah, we're gonna get a camera in it today, but they were in jail last night. They're gonna be in
I
jail.
lost you a little bit there at the end.
Forgive my absence, but I was feasting on a Philly cheesesteak.
We also need to remember that
But
the used cars
if you can
today,
hear me okay. When I say dial in, it's just especially today's day and age with the wide variety of vendors, there's also a wide variety of choices that you're going to go with the equipment. So, you trying to figure out what those priorities are and what your department specifically, what those priorities are that you've now realized based on a prior deployment. So maybe it's changed a little bit. Like I said, maybe your big thing at the beginning was battery life as an example. And let's say mounting options. So now, maybe your top vendors that you've dialed in that scope because the scope is huge, but your priorities now are smaller. So dialing those in to what are these must-haves based on what we're experiencing at our department compared to what we were trying to guess at before. And that's what I mean by dial in.
And that makes a lot of sense. Those features that are not necessarily a must-have, and things like you mentioned, battery life. If a body-worn camera doesn't have 12 hours of battery life, they need to rethink what they're doing. So that's a really good answer. Commissioner Adams, any thoughts on things that you'd add, things you would have done differently?
Well, tailing off of what I've learned here again today, every time I'm at one of your meetings, I learn something new. In working with Jeff over the last couple of years, I understand some of the things we missed up front. We were more focused on the equipment itself and it interfacing. I think I said that. What I rather would have done, again, add the IT person to our advisory committee, which would have brought in the thought process, because he was the one that figured out what have you done about storage when we didn't realize the amount of storage we would have needed to do what we were doing. And it wasn't that it wasn't discussed. It was just, it wasn't the focus of the priority of we treated it like an investigation. And as we began to pare down the functionality and the requirements of our police department, we realized that one of the glaring things we overlooked at first, but understood dramatic importance of was the technical backup. When is it? Where is it? How does it work? You know, say a unit is broken, how do we switch that out, get a new unit, get it replaced? Say we have a technical difficulty at 10 p.m. at night with some piece of equipment, it's not operating completely or correctly. Can we contact somebody? And that helped us narrow down the scope a little further from just email technical assistance to verbal technical assistance. That was important to us. And we were able to also fall back on what is the scope of the training for the technical officer on our end to work with this equipment on a daily basis, as well as our captain who oversaw that procedure. And we wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to be purely Zoom meetings or we're going to meet once a week for an hour and we're going to discuss your problems that you've come across. We wanted intense training. We wanted them to take them through a class setting type situation. And we ended up, we ran into some of the problems with COVID during the rollout, we ended up doing a Zoom situation, but it was on a regular basis with an as needed follow-up. So it worked out very well for us with the end vendor, being WatchGuard. But had we asked the other ones, we would have had better information on what that backup looked like. So it's important to ask these questions. Sit down and look at it. You're buying a piece of electronics. What do you want it to do? Where do you want it to work? What do you want it to cost? And what happens if it breaks? And I think we would have used that thought process a little clearer up front than instead of learning about the warranty and things at the end. And, through our 6 weeks of review.
I think that's some very good points, customer service and support
Right.
for their products, because of course everybody knows if they've dealt with body worn cameras, they do break. There are issues. So how quick you can get a replacement delivered, how quick you can work through an issue, whether it's software, hardware, the body worn camera, memory has to be flashed, whatever it may be.
Right.
The support from the particular vendor, of course, is very important. And of course, I would imagine, you'd want to verify that with other users.
Exactly.
How did X vendor, provide you support in the middle of the night when you broke a camera or when you couldn't access the video on a camera that's critical.
Right.
All very important issues. I see that we have our poll results, and I was a little bit surprised that ease of use was out there as much, but I can understand that completely because it's very important that the technology is easy to use to the not only the camera itself, but of course the software that supports it. But it's easy to use for the user. So I could see why that jumps ahead of everything else. Everything else, interoperability, price and clarity. They're all, and there's many other, of course, factors that we didn't list that would fall into that other category. But interesting results, and it looks like everyone that's participating today has the user in mind, and the officers on the street does actually have to wear the camera. So that's good. Emma, do we have one more poll?
I have one more. I will go ahead and send that out now.
Well, as everyone can see, two to three. So that goes in line that I think 82% did do some T&E. Of course, if you only looked at one manufacturer, that's it's either going to meet or not meet. But two to three, you must have whittled down the choices out there and conducted and looked at what works the best for your agency. So real interesting. Well, I think that finishes up all of my questions, all our polls. Our remaining time, you could either, I think, rejoin the main group, or the three of us will stay on, and answer any questions that come up. And-
Charles.
But Emma, I just thought of one more thing. For
Yes.
additional information about T&E, please don't forget to check the BJ's Body Worn Toolkit and the BWA TTA's website for additional stories, information, and things that'll provide you some information on doing T&E.
Charles,
How's it, Emma?
real quick, just Commissioner Adams, thanks so much for participating and agreeing to help us out on this topic. You've been a great help on all of these, so appreciate your insight.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you to all of our presenters. So just so everyone knows, this is the main Zoom link. So you all can go ahead and stay in this meeting, and we will get to our next session in about 5 minutes or so.